It's always so fun waiting for this thing to go live because you never know when it's actually gonna do it. And only the people who rewatch this replay get to see the very beginning of my craziness for the first 10 seconds. So, welcome to Tuesday. We are talking about celebrating today and this idea that we go through this life and we have our checklist. I have my checklist. And we just keep checking off the boxes and not actually doing the things that we need to do in order to keep checking off the boxes because we're always looking for this next thing. I got really interested in this several years ago when I was reading through a book that I think is called The Happiness Advantage. I can put it in the comments if you're interested, but it is by somebody who's from Harvard, and what he talks about is this positive psychology of we're always pushing for the next thing. We want more. We're looking for more. We get to the more and then we feel empty in that moreness. And there's never enough. And part of that is because we're constantly going through this to-do list, checking off the boxes, and not taking the time to celebrate. So, what does celebrating have to do with anything? I mean, I know we sing the song, we go celebrate good times, come on. But what if you did stop and celebrate? What would that do for you? What would that do for your productivity? And what would that do for your team's productivity? So a lot of times we get stuck, especially in the corporate space, of we have hard skills. Somebody knows how to code. They know how to write SOPs. They know how to fill in the blank. That's your hard skill. And then we forget about the soft skills because for so many years, especially when I started in corporate 10, 12 years ago, everybody was like, you need to know X, Y, and Z. You need to be putting out some kind of what they would consider productive thing, shipping code, those kinds of activities. But what we're finding is that actually things like creativity, systemization, strategy, these more soft skills, communication, leading, are the things that we really need in the workplace that we're missing because we spent so many years focusing on those hard skills that we didn't do the soft skills. For those who don't know, why is it called soft skills versus hard skills? Well, a hard skill, originally when these were named, was by the military, and it was anything that had to do with metal, metalworking, anything that was on a gun or anything like that. So if it had to do with metal, it was a hard skill. If it had to do with anything else, it was a soft skill. So by throwing soft skills out the window, we have thus thrown out most of what being a human, running a business, communicating with other people. And I don't know, I hate to break this to the people who are like, soft skills. Nobody wants to know soft skills. Well, last time I checked, the people buying from you are people, which means that you have to communicate with said humans. You have to communicate with your staff and your colleagues. And that requires leading yourself, leading your team if you're in a leadership position, as well as leading the customer or client towards the goal that you want them to have. So when we talk about this as a whole, I want you to just take that into consideration because we're going to talk about soft skills all the time. I train on soft skills. I come into corporations and I train on leadership and communication and how do we create better content and how do we storytell better in order to get people to do the things that we are hoping that they will do. And this is the way that we create that environment. One of those ways is by celebrating wins, big or small, doesn't matter what they are. Because we know that when we celebrate wins, that naturally releases those feel-good chemicals like dopamine in the brain, which makes it more likely that I'll do it again. So think about this, like, especially with small children. We see this at that level of if you do something well and I celebrate it, you're more likely to do it again. And so if we continue to put that into our culture of you do something well, we celebrate it. It's this whole idea of, Pavlov's dog. When he hears the bell, he knows he salivates. It's that same concept, but we're doing it in a way that helps people move from point A to point B in a much more linear fashion, and it's more predictable. Because if I know that I'm going to do my job and get all the tasks done, it's not like some corporations that will just put more stuff on your desk because, hey, you did a good job, here's more crap to do. which sometimes that has to happen because of the team and what you're doing. But if that's the motivation for people to do things, they will eventually stop doing things. And if you're wanting to learn more about this, there's something called an S curve that we can talk about in a training with your own team of how do we keep people in this, imagine a giant S. How do we keep people in the middle of that S so that they don't either leave the job because they're a high performer, or they quit and they just stay and they do exactly what they need to do. We need to keep people in that sweet spot to where they're being productive. They are putting out the kind of content and productivity that we want them to, but they're also making it to where they want to be there. They don't hate coming in on Mondays. And a lot of times this comes down to human decency, but one of those pieces is going to be, how do we celebrate our team? How do we celebrate our own accomplishments every little step of the way? So let's say I have a top 3 that I do every day. I've got a giant notebook. This is what mine looks like. And you can see that there's three little things here. So I write down my 3 for the day. You can also do this on sticky notes. And when you get those 3 done for the day, how are you celebrating? How are you celebrating your team at the end of the day? These can be really simple. So let's talk through some ideas of how do we celebrate people. Some of these can be as simple as coming over and giving a high five, or sending a funny GIF in Slack, or, grabbing lunch together. You don't have to do big celebrations every single time. This is the same thing that we think about when we think about self-care for ourselves, is we think self-care needs to be bubble baths and going to a spa, when really it could just be taking a hot shower alone, or, sitting and having a cup of coffee before it gets cold in the morning. So what are some ways that you can start doing that with your team and start implementing those? And I'd love to see you just pop those in the comments, because there's so many fun things that you can do. And there's so many creative ways to celebrate what your team is doing on a regular basis. And as simple and silly as it seems, the science shows us that actually leads to more productivity, more motivation, and higher of hitting those goals that you want to hit, because there's that extra oomph to get you to the finish line, to get you to where you want to go, instead of, nose to the grindstone kind of leadership that we're used to seeing in a lot of places. What are other ways that we can start really engaging with our people so that they know, like, and trust us as a leader to move them to the next step? So I will see you all tomorrow. And if you're looking for more ways that you can lead your team, send me a DM and we can figure out some ways to help you celebrate your team, as well as train them on how to lead themselves, their teams, and the clients and customers that you're trying to serve. Until tomorrow.